week's action-packed episode of One Piece, the destruction of the Dressrosa Kingdom is imminent, as Luffy and Doflamingo begin their climactic battle, and Luffy prepares to unveil the next evolution of his devil fruit powers. Woo-woo! You hear that coming down the tracks? That's the very first One Piece hype train of 2016. There's no point in hiding it, you've probably already seen the title of this review. Luffy is finally getting ready to use the Gear 4th ability. If you don't read the manga version, do not watch the preview for the next episode. You don't get a full shot of Luffy, but you get to see enough to probably piece together what he is going to look like. That being said, this week's episode was just hype. Pure hype for the next episode of One Piece, which I honestly think is going to be pretty freaking legendary. The preview alone got me hyped up. It looks amazing. But how did this week's episode of One Piece hold up? Well, it was pretty good. For the most part, it was just a hype episode. The best parts about it are definitely Luffy versus Doflamingo. The rest of the episode is pretty much stuff we've seen before. Citizens running away from the strings, Usopp shitting his pants, not to mention we have some scenes of Trafalgar Law and Cavendish. Cavendish was actually kind of cool this week, actually how he stepped in and ended up saving the day. I honestly thought originally it was going to be Bartolomeo, but Cavendish has come a long way, and it's actually pretty cool that he's decided to stay with Trafalgar Law, who wants to stay behind and actually see Luffy take on Doflamingo, sort of his final wish, and they decide to go along with this plan. There's also some antics from Bartolomeo and Nico Robin, just more of the same stuff that we've seen before. The reason to check out this week's episode is Luffy versus Doflamingo, and I love the setting of this battle. Very much like the battle between Kyros and Diamante, the setting is really unique here. I love that it's amongst all of this destroyed rubble and fire all over the place. When I was reading this in the manga version, it's kind of hard to put color to all of this because it's all black and white. This one has a lot of great atmosphere behind it. Everything suddenly got a little bit darker. There's these embers that are constantly in the sky. The way they reflect off of Doflamingo's glasses look really cool. As far as, like, the actual atmosphere of the episode, it kicked all sorts of ass. And there were some pretty cool action scenes, mostly just Luffy and Doflamingo trading blows with their hockey attacks, which had these big explosions, which are not too different from what you'd see from, like, Dragon Ball Z, but honestly, it makes sense. Same studio, they've worked on this stuff before. My favorite attack scene from this episode was probably this one that Doflamingo did, when Luffy tried to hit him with his Grizzly Magnum, and Doflamingo just jumps over that and ends up kneeing Luffy right in the face, sending him right into the dirt. This was pretty much the attack that made Luffy realize, I'm going to have to use the Gear 4th, which he does when he bites his arm, and of course that leads to the classic to be continued screen. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of One Piece? This was a pretty awesome build-up to Gear 4th. I just cannot wait to see the next episode. It kind of sucks that this episode right here is going to always be remembered for the one that, hyped up Gear 4th, but there were some really cool moments. I do need to say, though, that the animation could have looked better at times. There were a few moments where Luffy and Doflamingo just seemed kind of like ragdolls, where their movements were a little too stiff, but there were still enough moments that I thought were really awesome, especially, like I said, that one moment with Doflamingo kneeing Luffy in the face just had so much impact behind it. Or the scene where Luffy actually did the Red Hawk ability, which had this big fiery explosion, which just created this, like, destruction crater all around them. Like I said, very much like Dragon Ball Z, but I really, really liked this stuff a lot. Luffy, of course, does what he always does in this episode as well, which is he shoulders all of the burden, decides to carry it all himself, and bring all of that into battle, which is going to allow him to unleash his brand new Gear 4th ability. And like I said, the preview for the next episode, if anything, shows that it's going to be a very nice looking episode. The transformation sequences, some of the big attacks that we're going to see, I cannot wait to see it. It just looks so colorful, exciting, action-packed, and just powerful. Feel the power, my friends! Gear 4th is coming, and this week's episode was a very hype episode of One Piece. It was a little slow. Let's not forget that it took about 7 minutes just to get into this week's episode. However, that's pretty standard for One Piece. We, again, are so close to the manga version in terms of the story that they have to do things like this. And I still think they should do a filler arc before they move on to the next arc. I really think that's something that could be possible. They need to do that to sort of fix some of the pacing issues, or at least to alleviate them just a little bit. But getting back on track, this week's episode right here was fun, it was exciting, it had a lot of great iconic imagery in it, and just the end of the episode will leave viewers with goosebumps and just begging to see the next episode, which, damn, next week is going to kick all sorts of ass, my friends. So this week's episode gets a 4 out of 5 from me. But I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about this week's episode of One Piece? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you have a favorite moment? Maybe a favorite action scene from this week's episode? Maybe some of the cool clashes between Luffy and Doflamingo? What do you want to see from the Gear 4th ability and the rest of the One Piece anime series? Please tell me in the comments section below. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. If you would like to, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.